Hi everybody, my name is Rob Scott from UC Today, and in this session we'll be discussing why communication is key to cash flow during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're a telecoms carrier, technology vendor or service provider, and you have credit facilities or significant contractual obligations, then stay tuned. Today I'm joined by one of the leading investment banking experts in the industry, Michael Quinn, founder partner at Q Advisors. Welcome, Michael.
Hey Rob, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Michael. Hey, thanks for joining me today. Always a good place to start, Michael. Let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what Q Advisors do, please.
Sure. Well, when I'm not stuck in my house and home office like everybody else, we run a global investment banking boutique specializing in TMT. We're the leading cloud and managed services investment bank in the world based on a number of deals done. We've done over 130 in the space. Deals like the Gamma Voz Telecom deal, the Destiny deal, the TPX Cirrus deal of late. We've got offices in Denver, San Francisco, and Amsterdam. So we've been growing rapidly, and we're seeing our business focus change a little bit from M&A and financing to a bunch of restructurings going on right now. And we've had a lot of experience over the years serving as chief restructuring officer for companies, as well as helping them through liquidity crises. We saw this in 2001 when we started, and again in 2008, and we've kind of looked in that playbook again to see what can be helpful to our clients.
Great, thanks, Michael. And lots happening in the industry right now. We're in the middle of the pandemic, as rightly so. You're working from home, and so am I. And so it's been just a great time to talk about this subject in terms of finance, getting organizations in our space through this period. So why don't we start with why cash is king? Could you talk to us a little bit around kind of which payables do you pay, which do you put off, how to restructure and delay contractual obligations potentially right now? Is it
Sure. I mean, I think every company, Rob, has got to look at what obligations they have going out, and they range at the top of the food chain from their credit facility with a lender. Then it goes to dealing with their landlord and dealing with their critical vendor, and then dealing with the non-critical vendors, right? So you've got that on one side of the ledger. And on the other side of the ledger, you have your receivables, how much cash you're bringing in. And I think what people are finding in this pandemic situation is that their customers typically are paying slower than they traditionally do. So the result has been that you have your current payables every month, you have your interest and principal on your debt, and you may not have the same type of cash flow right now, either because people are not paying on time, and B, because you're not selling like you normally would in a non-COVID environment. So the result is that there is tightness between what the inflow is and what the outflow is. And it always reminds me of the famous Steve McQueen movie, Cool Hand Luke, which when he's on the ground, the warden of the prison looks at him after kicking him in the gut, saying, hey, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And so to me and to our firm and our advice to our clients is, communication with your critical vendors and your lenders is key. And so you have to tell them every step of the way where you are, what your cash flow looks like, what you can pay on time, what you can't pay on time. And so if you don't do that, and then you run into tightness without communicating this, and you just spring it on the vendor, or you spring it on the lender, you're not going to get the desired outcome. You should start with a weekly cash flow, right? What do I have to pay? What do I have on the balance sheet in terms of cash, and what's coming in? And every week you need to manage that cash critically. And you need to communicate with your lender first. Hey, this is what I can pay. Is there any grace I can get on my interest payments, for example? Can I move that and miss an interest payment or two and add that to the principal? Can I get a grace period on principal payments? Can we, and that we just extend out the term of the loan? To my critical vendors, hey, I know you're important to me. We want to pay you, but as you can imagine, cash flow is a bit tight right now. Can you give us more extended payment terms, right? And then for those vendors that are not critical, oftentimes business people will make the decision that, hey, that's not a critical vendor. I want to pay them because they're a small, medium-sized business like me. I'm not trying to stiff anybody, but I'm going to prioritize the things that are near and dear and critical to my business.
And is that a fairly typical call right now? That cash flow call is, I'm running out of cash. I need to kind of bridge this period somehow. Because we're all in this as a service industry, aren't we? So a lot of organizations will be paid on their cash is coming in on a monthly basis. So is that fairly typical at the moment then?
I don't know. I think you see it quite a bit. And, to the extent that folks have a line of credit under their credit facility, if they have such a credit facility, working capital facility, or a factoring facility for their accounts receivable, our advice is, to the extent you can, draw on that facility, because the more cash you have on the balance sheet, you can then make those critical vendor payments and don't have to have those conversations, right? But it's where you don't have a line of credit, or you don't have a working capital facility or an accounts receivable factoring facility, that you have to create your own working capital improvement. And you do that by stringing along payables, unfortunately. But you really don't have a choice. So you need to prioritize. And we're not saying that you don't pay everybody, but you work out a payment plan with somebody who's not a critical vendor, or even somebody who's a critical vendor. Because look, if I'm the vendor, I'd rather get paid in 90 days than not at all, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, and a lot of those bigger vendors, whether if they're providing you circuits or other kind of transport facilities, they have a little more balance sheet strength to weather delays in payables in small and medium businesses, right? So if you're paying BT for circuits, if you pay BT in 90 days instead of 30, BT can probably weather it longer than you can. Same with AT&T in the States. They're not going to cut you. They're not going to cut you off, because the public relations nightmare for the large carriers, the large financial institutions, is high.
Yeah, sure. So there's potentially two options here. One is to negotiate terms with your suppliers, the ones you're paying, and also look at your lenders. Let's look at lenders for a moment. So what kinds of things could you say to a lender to get them to help you out right now?
Well, I think a few things. One, communication is key. You have to be honest with them. Look, we will give you weekly cash flow forecasts. We will tell you where we are at any given moment each week. But what you're going to see is that we're tight right now, right? Our receivables are coming in are slower. So therefore, we would like you to do a number of different things. You could delay payment of interest. You can delay payment of principal. You can get additional grace periods on, for example, delivery of your audit, right? If you have a covenant like most do, because oftentimes right now your auditors can't get in and visit you. So how can you get your audit done? To the extent that there's a minimum cash balance requirement in your loan agreement, you maybe take that down a bit, right? So that you get a little more cash to use to pay your vendors. So there's a number of different things that you can do with your lenders, but you can't do any of it if you don't start early and are very proactive in getting the lenders involved in your discussions. What you don't want to do is, be at death's door in a month or two, and then you go and you work it out with your lenders. You want to start this dance early, right? And to the extent nothing's for free, right? So they may charge you a fee. They may ask for a little equity. They may increase your interest rate. And those things, it's all a negotiation, and you just have to weigh an increase in rate versus maybe a hiatus on paying interest for 3 months, right? That may be a worthwhile trade-off for you as the borrower.
Sure. And you have a great view of the marketplace. I mean, you operate globally. How are businesses holding up at the moment?
No, it's a great question, and I think there's still a wait and see. I think that the one thing that we know is that none of these businesses really have a sense in both in the cloud and managed services sectors, and even in the traditional telecom sectors, what actual churn is going to be, right? Everybody's been hunkered down in their houses for 6 to 8 weeks, and so you don't know how many companies are going to terminate services or unfortunately go out of business, right? So that's still the one unknown. I think from a cloud perspective, cloud comms perspective, what we're seeing is businesses are having varied degrees of success. Those that are primarily over the top and are providing cloud seats, they are actually seeing a growth in their monthly recurring revenue. They're seeing the need for remote workforce. They're seeing the need for desktop as a service and video clearly. So those services, those solutions, I think we're seeing an uptick in terms of billings and revenue. Collections may be a different story. On the other hand, the NRR, the non-recurring revenue, selling handsets, professional services for installing circuits, we're seeing a huge decrease. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Germany or Benelux or in the States, because you can't get into a premise to put in the circuit, right? Or nobody wants a handset for their office because they're not in the offices. So you're seeing a bit of a mixed message with the financial results of all of these companies.
So I take it that's really dependent on the revenue mix of the business ultimately.
Absolutely, and those folks who are still primarily on-prem PBX, they're probably hurting more than folks who are providing a cloud service, right? And I think this clearly, in our view, in Europe, is going to hasten the movement to cloud. And I think where in markets like Germany, in France, where the penetration is comparatively low to say Benelux or Sweden or the United Kingdom, you're going to see an increase in cloud communication services. And that, I think that's a good thing, because those countries historically have been moving slower than other places.
Yes, absolutely. I was speaking to Cavell Group recently as well about that, and they were saying that there's going to potentially be a huge acceleration in terms of cloud adoption going forward. Whereas the US, UK market and European markets generally similar kind of numbers, but let's say 20% currently in the cloud, it's going to be, the pendulum's really going to swing the other way potentially during and post COVID-19.
No, I think they're spot on. I mean, it's interesting because clearly video has become an absolute necessity, right? Because you can't have team meetings in person, so you need to do it. But there is a contrarian viewpoint, Rob, where there's going to be a backlash. People are sick of being on video calls, and they're going to want to have in-person meetings as soon as it's safe enough, right? So until there is more testing, until there's a vaccine, I think the folks who can work remotely are going to work remotely. And so to the extent you can provide collaboration tools, video tools, document sharing, that is going to be very, very important across any type of industry, because I think employers are worried about employee liability for having a workforce, being too compressed and too tight knit, in which the virus can spread. So if I can have my workforce work remotely and efficiently, I'm going to continue until the risk subsides.
Are there any brands at the moment that stand out in your mind that maybe some good learning lessons for the industry? I know we've seen some recent deals, IPOs, explosions in terms of stock price. Any that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been interesting. I would tell you that the M&A world has slowed considerably over the last 6 weeks, but I'm starting to see rumblings and people picking up things. Like we're lucky enough to be involved with the Gamma and the Vose deal, and that closed right in the middle of COVID while Spain was on lockdown. So I think for good companies that have a good revenue mix, there's still an ability to sell themselves and to raise capital. For those that have kind of a more of a legacy mix, I think that that's going to prove more difficult. But then you have situations that are, eye-opening, head-scratching, whatever we want to use, like Pexip, the Norwegian company, just announced that they're going to raise 200 million euro equivalent, or it might have been 200 million krona. I don't remember, but it was a significant raise on a company that's still quite tiny. But they're taking advantage of the fact that video is just such an important thing right now for businesses of all shapes and sizes, where they probably can raise it at a higher valuation post-COVID than they could have pre-COVID. So they're a benefactor of that. Other businesses have seen their stock price get hurt because they have a mix of different services, right? So I think to the extent that you're more cloud only, you're going to find a more receptive audience than if you have a lot of legacy services.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got video conferencing in there right now, you're potentially in a pretty good space too. So
that's true. And what you're seeing is folks like RingCentral and 8x8 jumping on the video bandwagon by offering it for free. And so if I'm a small business, why do I want to pay for Zoom when I can get it from 8x8 or RingCentral for free, right? I mean, I think that Zoom's growth in terms of users on its platform, security issues aside, has been phenomenal.
Yeah, I get those strategies, those freemium to premium strategies. What makes my head scratch a little bit is, how will that play out afterwards? Will we are we devaluing things like video as we speak because of those offers? But
no, I think because of the security issues around Zoom, because there's a lot of development done in China, you have real issues. So if you're serving governments, they may have if your developers are in Russia, Ukraine, China, we're not going to use your service. You see that quite a bit in the States. And I think you're going to see the acquisition of a lot of smaller video players, because there's still a number of them out there, and people will buy them, integrate them into their own UC platform, and then sell them as a bundle with better security, encryption technology and the like. So I think that's going to be, you're going to see an acceleration of acquisitions in the video space, because there's a lot of them that are sub 50 million in turnover that are going to get taken up by bigger players.
Great stuff. So just to kind of bring this to a conclusion, but my last question for you, Michael, today would be just kind of what next for the industry. We've talked around a couple of things there, but anything significant you think coming up for the industry?
I think you have to look at the industry kind of in segments. I think in Europe you're going to see further acceleration of consolidation once people can travel a bit, and once the lockdown is lifted, because you're going to have people with capital, particularly private equity backed guys, being able to pick up niche players like video players, or in geographies where capital isn't available, yet they want to expand into those geographies. And you're going to see more winners come out of that, right? It's going to be a quick sprint to the finish, I believe, maybe by mid 2021, and the winners and the losers will have been picked in Europe. In the US, I think you're going to see some big, large transactions, because there are some folks who have nice parts of their business and other parts of their business that are not particularly appealing. They're going to jettison the non-appealing businesses. There's lots of distressed equity funds, distressed debt funds picking up those non-core assets. And I think you're going to see a lot of that as well. We're going to be hosting an M&A virtual conference with the Cavell Group on the 4th of June. And we're going to invite industry leaders from the cloud and managed services space, as well as some of the more active PE and lenders in the space. And I think in that forum, which it's kind of an interesting platform, you can bump around to different breakout sessions. You're going to see a lot of the M&A strategy of these players being revealed to the public.
Thanks, Michael. And for anyone looking to get in touch with Q Advisors or yourself, what's the best way to get in touch?
They can email me at quinn@qllc.com or go to our website, which is just qllc.com. We're up to 25 of us now across the globe, and we love to meet new folks and offer our assistance where we can be valuable.
Fantastic, Michael. It's been great talking to you today. Some great insights. No, thank you. Thanks to everyone for watching. If you've enjoyed today's session, we'd really appreciate a like or a share. But we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
All right. Take care.